My parents funded my golden brother's career, not mine. Now he's broke, I'm rich, and they want help. My name is Nick, and I'm 26 now. But let's go back to when I was 18, when my life suddenly flipped upside down. Picture this. My parents sitting at the dining table, their faces serious, like they were about to read a will, not tell me that they decided to cut off my financial support. They looked at me, and my mom said with a smile that could only mean trouble, "Nick, we've thought it over and decided it's best if you pay for college yourself." I was in shock. Like, what the hell, seriously? Then came the real drama. "You know, we've invested everything in Tom," my dad added proudly, as if explaining why they'd bought a shiny new sports car instead of a family minivan. Tom, of course, sat across from me with a smug look on his face, like he'd just won the lottery. That golden boy had been their favorite from day one. He was the kid who could eat the last slice of cake and convince our parents I'd done it. Handsome, smart, charismatic. The perfect child. And of course this perfect brother knew exactly which strings to pull to get what he wanted. My parents were throwing money at his training like it was a new kind of investment. Public speaking coaches, courses for aspiring entrepreneurs, even a personal mentor. All for him. And me? My training consisted of random summer jobs and life lessons like, be a man and make your own way. All I got were tons of useful advice like, "Nick, you should learn to be independent." Thanks, Captain Obvious. Honestly, I felt like a forgotten toy in the attic. Unwanted, abandoned, and overlooked. In those moments when Tom shone in the latest family photo shoots dressed in expensive new clothes, I'd sit in the corner, trying not to choke on the mix of parental pride and my own despair. They seemed blind to my struggle to step out of Tom's shadow. And Tom, he knew it, and he relished every moment. This was his personal stage, where he played the lead role, while I was just the unlucky extra. But you know what? I decided not to give them that satisfaction. Yes, I was abandoned. Yes, I was ignored. But inside I lit a real fire. I decided to prove I could succeed without their damn help. Not for them, not for recognition, but so that one day Tom would look at me and understand that I did it. I did it on my own. After I proudly turned down my parents' so-called help, I realized life had suddenly become harsh and very real, like a cold shower at dawn. I got a job at an all-night diner, the kind that smells of old grease, mixed with the desperation of its regulars. Grilling, greasy burgers, drunk customers, and endless coffee refills. That was my life. The pay was miserable, but hey, a man's gotta do what a man's gotta do, right? I saved every dollar like it was more than just money, like it was a piece of my future. By day, I worked, and by night, I sat in front of my laptop, devouring online courses and reading every free PDF I could find. I had no time for nonsense or parties. But Tom? Oh, he had all the time in the world. Time to live the how to be successful when your parents pay for everything life. He opened his first business, fully funded by our parents, as you might have guessed. It was some kind of marketing agency, but honestly, it looked more like a shiny adult toy than a real business. Our parents poured so much cash into that project that I sometimes wondered if it wouldn't have been easier for them to just buy him a private island. Tom, of course, didn't hide his success. He'd invite me to his fancy parties, where everyone dressed like they were on an Instagram photo shoot, while I stood there in worn jeans and an old t-shirt, feeling like a fish out of water. They'd order expensive cocktails with names I couldn't even pronounce, while I munched on a cold sandwich in the kitchen, watching Tom bask in the spotlight. Sometimes he'd make a point of coming over, smiling and saying things like, "Hey Nick, how's work? Still flipping burgers?" It would have been funny if it weren't so damn humiliating. Every time I heard his jokes, it turned my stomach. I wanted to fire back with something clever, but I knew that would only make him smile wider. Tom loved seeing me struggle, like my battle was some kind of live reality show just for him. But you know what? I swallowed my pride, held my anger, and kept grinding. Because I knew that those cold sandwiches, late-night shifts, and online courses were all steps towards something bigger. And as for Tom, let him enjoy his fake successes while he still had our parents' money. Tom looked like a typical successful guy who practically glowed with money. The kind of Mr. Perfect who always had a suit 2 sizes more expensive than anyone else's. His business, of course, seemed to be booming, or at least it looked that way from the outside. He loved flashing new contracts and giving presentations with fancy graphs at conferences. Yeah, what a show. But then I started to see that not everything was as shiny as it seemed. Tom trusted his friends way too much. The same guys in trendy blazers who cared more about his money than his business. Each one looked like a professional golfer who couldn't hit a ball into a hole if his life depended on it. Just a bunch of spoiled rich kids who knew how to burn through someone else's money faster than I could save a few bucks. But Tom didn't see it, or didn't want to see it. He kept signing shady contracts and each time pulled out his wallet to cover the losses. I watched it all like a real show, mistakes piling up like dominoes. He was spending more than he earned, but still managed to throw expensive parties and buy pointless things like glowing scooters and designer coffee makers he didn't even know how to use. What the hell, dude? What are you doing? That was the eternal question in my mind every time he took another loan or bought another useless toy. And our parents? They turned a blind eye to it all, as if Tom wasn't losing money, but instead playing some entrepreneurial survival game. They repeated the same thing, like a broken record. All great entrepreneurs learn from their mistakes. Oh, I saw Tom learning how to waste money that wasn't even his. And me? I didn't sit around waiting. I didn't have rich parents to cover my screw-ups, so I did everything myself. I took on small freelance projects, building websites, setting up ads, even assembling furniture if it paid. Slowly, step by step, I saved every dollar, every cent, and put it towards starting my own business. Step by step, brick by brick, I was building my little empire, while Tom kept throwing money around like confetti. And you know what? It felt amazing, watching his successful career start to crumble, while my modest, honestly earned savings grew. His business looked like a giant glittery bubble, ready to burst any second. And me? I had my popcorn ready. A couple of years later, I launched my first venture, a small online store. Honestly, I didn't expect it to take off the way it did. At first, it was just a simple website selling little knickknacks, the kind of stuff you never think you'll buy until you see it in your cart. But somehow, it worked. And not just worked, it exploded. Orders started pouring in, and I was practically drowning in them. I worked like a madman, slept 4 hours a night, ate on the go, and drank so much coffee, I was pretty sure my eyes glowed in the dark. Every dollar I earned went right back into the business. I updated the website, bought more inventory, and ran ads. I was running on autopilot, but I knew it was all for something bigger. I felt like a true underdog about to show everyone what I was made of. And Tom? Oh, by then he'd already drowned in his own ambitions. His proud business, the one he flaunted so much, went bankrupt. Big surprise, huh? His precious partners decided honesty was too boring and ditched him, stealing most of the money and leaving him with a pile of debt. His business collapsed with such a bang that even I, busy as I was, couldn't help but notice. It was one of those moments when you feel that justice exists, even if you have to nudge it in the right direction. My parents, of course, panicked. How could this happen? Their golden boy suddenly hit rock bottom. They were desperate, and finally, they realized things had gone wrong. And then, one evening, I got a call. I knew it would be something special as soon as I saw their number on the screen. "Nick, we need to talk," Mom said with a voice that sounded like her world had just ended. I already knew they were going to ask me to help Tom, and surprise, that's exactly what they did. They started telling me how he was in a tough spot, how he needed family support. I listened with a cold smile and simply said, "No, sorry, I can't help." Silence on the other end, as if they couldn't believe that I, the worthless younger son, refused to help their precious Tom. And yes, when I said no, I could practically hear their shocked expressions turning to stone. I imagined their faces, their disbelief, their what the hell just happened. But you know what? There wasn't a hint of pity in my eyes, only coldness. Because I'd done it all myself, and Tom was the one who'd been handed everything, and threw it all away. My business grew like a wild weed after rain, and one day I realized I'd made my first million. $1 million, baby. It was like jumping off a skyscraper and landing softly on a pile of money. What did I do first? Moved to a fancy neighborhood where every house screamed success. I bought myself an apartment with huge windows overlooking the whole city. It was my moment of triumph. I stood in my new living room, holding a glass of champagne, thinking, "Yeah, Nick, you did it. You showed them all." Meanwhile, Tom, the great entrepreneur, moved back in with our parents, tail between his legs. His life was like a slow-motion disaster, debts piling up like a snowball, while those same friends who raised glasses at his parties vanished without a trace. Our parents decided to sell their car, yeah, their precious car, to cover his debts. And it wasn't some rusty old clunker, but their beloved family sedan, the one Dad carefully polished every Sunday. Now, the same parents who once looked at me as a failure began to look at me with hope. I saw that look in their eyes when they called or visited my new apartment. "Nick, we know you've made it. Maybe you could help Tom. He's struggling so much and really needs support." Oh, I'd heard that cry for support 1,000,000 times. Not happening. What a plot twist, huh? They wouldn't say it outright, but I knew I was their last hope to save their precious golden boy. Only now, the golden boy was covered in a thick layer of rust, and they were hoping I'd be his savior. But no, I kept my distance. I was polite but cold. Every time they came to me with requests, I just smiled and said I couldn't help, that I had my own responsibilities. And it wasn't easy. Deep down, maybe I did have that stupid drop of pity for Tom, but I knew he'd brought this on himself. "You made your bed, now lie in it, buddy." Yeah, it wasn't easy, because like it or not, they were my family. But I also knew I couldn't be the one to fix everything again. I'd built my life from scratch, brick by brick, and I wasn't about to let them tear down my fortress for someone who'd had it all handed to him and ruined it. One evening, I sat in my cozy office, enjoying the city view through a panoramic window and feeling on top of the world. Then I heard a hesitant knock at the door. I opened it and saw my parents. They stood there like two shadows from the past, worn out and tired. My once proud and confident parents looked like the world had crushed them under its weight. Their eyes, always full of judgment and arrogance, were now empty and defeated. "Well, hello," I thought, though out loud I only said, "What's going on?" My parents sat down on the leather couch across from my desk and started telling their sad story. Apparently, Tom had messed up again. This time, he'd gotten himself into so much debt they were on the brink of losing their home. Their beautiful home that once seemed like an impenetrable fortress. And here they were, in my office, struggling to keep their dignity. "Tom has realized all his mistakes," Mom said with a trembling voice. Dad nodded, backing her up, as if this was the most important confession in history. They told me he'd changed, that he finally understood he'd been wrong, and that he just needed one more chance. Oh, how many times I'd heard that tale. I knew Tom hadn't changed. He was just cornered, and this was his last shot at salvation. I listened to them with a patient smile, then slowly stood, walked around the desk and sat down in front of them. I looked them straight in the eyes, trying to hide my sarcastic smirk, and said, "All right, I'll help, but only on my terms." Mom blinked in surprise, and Dad tensed, as if I'd just offered them a deal with the devil. And honestly, that's exactly what it was. I wasn't going to be the savior who jumped into the pit for an ungrateful golden boy. No, I wanted them to know what it felt like to be at the bottom when there's no one to catch you. Time for a little role reversal, as they say. "What terms?" Dad finally asked, clearly not expecting anything good. I smiled wider, enjoying the moment. This was my game now, and I was setting the rules. I sat back in my chair, casually resting against the back, letting the silence hang in the air. I'd made my offer, and now my parents looked at me like I'd just asked them to sell their souls to the devil. Oh yeah, folks, that's exactly what's happening, I thought. savoring the moment. "Here are my terms," I began, with a tone I'd never have dared use with my parents as a kid. "I'll pay off all the debts, every last dollar. But in return, you'll sell me the house. Completely. And one more thing. I want full control over Tom's finances." Mom turned red, and Dad almost choked on his outrage. "You want our house?" he said, as if I'd asked for the shirt off his back. "Yes, I want your house, because I'm done being the one left on the sidelines. Now it's my move." They exchanged looks, clearly not expecting this twist. But what choice did they have? They needed someone to pull them out of the pit. And that someone was me. Tom sat there, tense, but silent. I could see his jaw clench, knowing he had no choice. His pride was hitting rock bottom, but he understood that without me, he was lost. He said nothing, then slowly nodded, defeated, like a chess piece cornered. "All right, Nick," he said through gritted teeth. "I agree." I wanted to laugh, but instead I just handed them the contract I'd prepared in advance. Oh yeah, I came prepared. They signed the papers, and in that moment, as the ink dried, everything changed. Now I wasn't just helping. I was taking control of everything they'd ever considered theirs. Every time Tom tried to plan something, I was the first to check his ideas. He hated it, but he couldn't do anything. He knew I could just snap my fingers, and everything he had left would vanish. The same parents who had always told me to be independent now depended on me. It was a twisted sense of justice coursing through my veins, and I loved every moment of it. Now I managed every account, every check, every transaction. Tom was under my financial microscope, and I liked it. At one point, he tried to argue when I rejected yet another one of his harebrained ideas, but I just smiled and said, "Forget it. As long as you're dependent on me, you play by my rules." I was the one steering this ship, and if they wanted back on board, they had to follow my terms. It was a sweet feeling of power, and you know what? I enjoyed it. Years went by. Everything changed. The empire I'd built from scratch grew to ridiculous proportions. I wasn't just successful, I was filthy rich. Yeah, man, I became a billionaire. And when I say billionaire, I mean the level where you don't just buy one yacht, but 3, just to have enough space for all your guests. My companies flourished like mushrooms after rain, and every new venture brought me more money than I'd ever dreamed of. And Tom? Oh yeah, Tom was still around, but not as the shiny director he once dreamed of being. No, he worked at one of my companies as a regular manager. Yep, just another cog in the machine. It was funny seeing him there, tidy, modest, in a gray suit that had lost all its former glory. This was the same guy who used to boss people around and bask in our parents' money, and now he was signing reports and monitoring staff schedules. What a fall from grace, huh? My parents? They stopped talking about the golden boy like they used to. No more bragging stories about how talented and promising Tom was. Now, they quietly thanked me for everything they still had. Their home, their stability, the comfortable retirement I'd secured for them. I saw the shift in their eyes. Where there used to be doubt and disappointment when they looked at me, there was now quiet gratitude. No words needed, guys, I get it. But you know what the most interesting thing was? I no longer craved their approval. At some point, I realized I didn't need their love or praise. I was the master of my own life, the creator of my own fate. I didn't need their approval. I had my own damn empire. And Tom? He learned to live humbly. All that old swagger was gone. He no longer spent money on expensive toys or threw loud parties. Now he was the one sitting in the corner while someone else celebrated success. And you know, he accepted it. But here's the thing. I'd sometimes catch him looking at me. In his eyes, there was this shadow of envy. Envy of what I had become, of the person he'd always wanted to be. He didn't say it anymore, but he didn't need to. I just knew. And that was the real triumph. The realization that I did it on my own. I wasn't just the winner of this story. I was the author.